doing? Hey, how are you? Set. Hey, good afternoon. Thank you for joining Sheriff Williams, Fire Chief Powers, and myself here today to collaborate an effort between Jacksonville Sheriff's Office and our Fire and Rescue Department that is making a big difference in our community and how we handle missing persons cases. Yesterday, we paused as a nation to commemorate Missing Children's Day, a time to express our undying commitment to finding those children who are lost and to supporting their friends and loved ones in their absence. In addition, there have been multiple cases in our area over the past few weeks that have raised community awareness about this issue. The Sheriff, Fire Chief, and I wanted to take a moment to highlight a collaboration between our departments that maximizes resources and streamlines our processes to find missing children and endangered persons as quickly as possible. I can think of few things more heartbreaking and stressful than a parent losing their child. All three of us up here are fathers, and we cannot imagine the grief and emotions a parent goes through during such a time. And that is why we are here today. The professionals at JSO and JFRD have developed the Missing Endangered Persons Search and Rescue Program that combines resources from both departments to act as a force multiplier, leveraging personnel and equipment to find the missing as quickly and efficiently as possible. When initiated, public safety personnel are rapidly deployed to the last known location under a unified command structure, the same system we use to command other emergency responses, such as hurricanes and bomb threats. The program utilizes technologies, including a virtual search computer program that has already helped us safely recover many children, elderly individuals, and mentally challenged persons. The system was integral in helping us recover the missing Williams children in December of 2019 when the young brother and sister were found huddled in a small wooden structure in the woods on the city's west side. I'm grateful for the teams at the Sheriff's Office and our Fire Department for their hard work, collaboration over this last couple of years, and I'm proud to announce that this best practice is now codified in both departments' policies and procedures. I'm confident this collaborative, smart approach to missing persons will be a national model for agencies and municipalities, will transform the way police and fire departments work together for the safety of our communities. And now it's my pleasure to introduce someone I've had a great partnership with over the last 6 years. I think it's been 6 years, and has also become a friend, Sheriff Mike Williams.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. So, as you know, so many of these cases around the country and sometimes right here in Jacksonville end in tragedy. And so as we begin to look at ways to get better in a lot of areas, this is one area that we clearly focused on. As the Mayor said, we've been working in this capacity for a couple of years, but today's about the fact that Keith Powers and I both have put this in policy in our agencies, and so it's on paper. This is the way we're going to do business moving forward. It's a great partnership. JFRD is a great public safety partner in this community, and we do a lot of things with them and couldn't be as successful as we are without them. So with that, again, I want to thank my team, thank Keith Powers, Chief Powers and his team for the hard work in putting this together. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Powers. Chief.
Good afternoon. First, I want to thank the mayor. He made a commitment to public safety when he came in office in 2015, and that commitment's been reflected in every one of his budgets. And those budgets have allowed us to buy the tools and equipment that we need for this program to be successful. So, Mayor, thank you for that. In addition, I want to thank the sheriff for his support. These type of public safety collaborations, they take a lot of personnel and they take a large commitment of resources to make them successful, and the sheriff's been unwavering in that commitment. And most importantly, I want to thank these men and women sitting right here, of JSO and JFRD, because without them, they are the true heroes in these MEPSAR searches. They're the ones that make it happen. They're the boots on the ground. They're the ones that have actually come together and codified this into policy, help put that together, and they spend hours away from their families when we make one of these MEPSAR call-outs, helping find these children. And in the last, I think the number was of the last 15 of these MEPSAR call-outs that we've had, 13 of those have been successful outcomes, and that's as a parent, as the mayor mentioned, as a parent, that is that's a big relief. When that child or missing person gets brought home. So I just want to talk just a second about what JFRD's role in MEPSAR is. Obviously, missing persons cases belong to the sheriff's office. That's their responsibility, but we work side by side with them. And when a Phase 1 MEPSAR is called out, we have our Fire Communication Center that actually sends out a BOLO to all of our email accounts in the department, plus all of our mobile MDTs that dispatch our runs, so that every time there's a fire and rescue piece of apparatus on the street, they know what they're looking for in the area they're looking for, and they know what the description of the missing person is. In addition, we dispatch the company surrounding the last known area of where the missing person was at. We surround that area and we flood that area with apparatus just riding up and down the streets. And the 2 last week that were successful, that's when they were found early on. And that's the key to this, is getting out there early on and getting on the streets and finding them. And then, of course, we assign a riding chief and our special operations chief to get there. And the special operations chief brings with him this new program that I want to talk about that we're using. And it's a virtual missing persons search program. And what it does is we put information, there's certain information that we enter into this program, and it basically tells us where to start looking for these missing people, depending on what, whether it's a child or whether it's a challenged adult or whatever that is. It tells us where to look. And the last few that we've had, those circles that it draws and says this is where you need to go, have been right where the person's been found. So the program's extremely important. That's one of those things that we were able to buy through the budget commitment from the mayor, and that's been extremely important in helping us. And then, of course, we put, our command post, our standby rescue units, rehab units, drones. Our drones have FLIR technology that can see into woods and see at night, that helps us find these people. So it's been a great collaboration between the sheriff and ourselves. Also, JFRD has on duty at any given time. They have about 40 USAR team members that are on duty at any given time. These are the urban search and rescue specialists that have specialized training, and they're on duty 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. These folks are the ones that go out and when we get into Phase 2 and they put out the grid. We put out grid searches and they actually search the grid. So this MEPSAR program is a best practice that has now been codified in policy, as both of the mayor and the sheriff mentioned before me. And that's to make sure that when Sheriff Williams and myself are gone, that the folks behind us can use this program. But it's also important to have it in policy because we have agencies reaching out now to us from all over the state and the country wanting to see what we're doing. And obviously, in public safety in Jacksonville, we've been at the forefront of that, initiating policies like, developing the rescue program or the hazmat teams in the fire service. And this is just another one of those programs that we're leading out front with. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the mayor and we'll take any questions you have.
Well, thank you. We are all available for questions if you have any. All right. Thank you.
video on WeatherNet. Liftoff conditions looking pretty good.
TS is ready for launch.
Ignition. Liftoff.
Falcon 9 has cleared the tower.
Ten, 9, 8,
Side booster ignition.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, May 26th, and on screen is a live view of Falcon 9 as it awaits its 2:59 p.m. Eastern Time launch from Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. My name is Yomezo, a Dragon propulsion engineer, joining you from our headquarters in Hawthorne, California. You're watching a live webcast for the 13th Starlink launch this year and 29th to date. Starlink is a satellite internet constellation designed and manufactured by SpaceX that can provide high-speed, low-latency internet to people living in remote and rural locations around the globe. If you've been following Starlink's progress, you'll know that our Starlink beta service is now available in the United States, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and several locations around Europe. We're excited to announce that service is now also available in Belgium and the Netherlands. To date, over 500,000 people have placed an order or put down a deposit for Starlink, and with every launch, we get closer to connecting more people across the world. As we launch more satellites, install more ground stations, and continue to improve our networking software, our data speed, latency, and uptime will improve dramatically. In addition to being able to provide our customers with better service, with every Starlink launch, we get closer to our goal of near global coverage of the populated world. As always, head over to starlink.com to learn more. We are now at T-minus 11 and a half minutes, and all systems are still go for an on-time liftoff at 2:59 p.m. Eastern Time. With that, let's take a closer look at the rocket that you see on your screen.
Hello, I'm Shiva Bharadwaj, a space operations engineer. Now, the Falcon 9 on your screen, that's our two-stage liquid-fueled rocket, has been loading propellants since T-minus 35 minutes. Falcon 9 stands 229 feet tall. That's slightly taller than a 21-story building, and much different from our recent Starlink missions, which launched and landed boosters for an 8th, 9th, and even a record-breaking 10th time. The booster that we're flying today is fairly new, having only supported the Sentinel-6A mission last year. Now, the bottom two-thirds of the vehicle is the first stage. You can see some of the soot left over from its previous flight. The first stage accelerates the vehicle through the Earth's atmosphere into space with the help of 9 Merlin engines that it has at its base. As I mentioned, we will be attempting to recover this first stage for the second time on our drone ship named Just Read the Instructions. On top of the first stage, we have our black carbon fiber inner stage, and on top of that is Falcon 9's second stage, which has a single Merlin vacuum or MVAC engine. Once the first and second stages separate, about 2.5 minutes into the mission, the Merlin vacuum engine will ignite and carry our 60 Starlink satellites into an elliptical orbit around planet Earth. Now, you'll also notice this large nose cone at the top of the rocket. That's called a fairing. That's where the stack of Starlink satellites is safely enclosed. The fairing's job is to protect those satellites from aerothermal heating, aerodynamic loads, and contamination during the ascent phase. Once we reach the vacuum of space, we'll jettison those fairing halves as the second stage continues on its journey to orbit. The fairing halves protecting our Starlink payload have quite a history. This will be the first fifth flight for one of the halves. Before today's launch, that half supported 4 previous Starlink missions going back to 2019. The other fairing half will be flying for the third time, previously having supported the Transporter 1 and Starlink 21 missions. Now, today's flight also marks the 40th time SpaceX has reflown fairing halves since November 2019. And of course, we're going to be attempting to recover them today using our recovery vessels named Go Searcher and Go Navigator. Beautiful day at the Cape. Weather is forecast 90% favorable for liftoff, and the recovery conditions look quite good for the booster. So with that, the vehicle, satellites, weather, and range are all looking good for an on-time liftoff just a few minutes from now. Now, if for some reason we do not launch today, we do have a backup opportunity available tomorrow at 2:38 p.m. Eastern Time.
Now that you know a little about the structure of Falcon 9 and its engines, the propellant, which is a substance used to create the energy to make the rocket go. Falcon 9 is a bipropellant vehicle, meaning it uses two propellants, a fuel and an oxidizer. An oxidizer is a type of chemical which a fuel requires to burn. Most burning on Earth uses oxygen, which is prevalent in the atmosphere. However, in space, there's no atmosphere to provide oxygen or other oxidizers, so rockets need to carry them up on their own. For Falcon 9, our fuel is a refined form of kerosene known as RP1, and our oxidizer is a super chilled liquid oxygen called LOX. The liquid oxygen is chilled well below its boiling point so that it becomes what we call densified, which means there is a much greater amount of mass per volume, and we can load more of it into the booster. In addition to its propellants, Falcon 9 also needs an ignition source in order to go. And for that, we use the chemical TTEB, or triethyl aluminum and triethyl borane. When it is fully fueled, Falcon 9 holds just over 1 million pounds of propellant that the vehicle will burn through in less than 3 minutes after liftoff. Once our Merlin engines begin to burn RP1 kerosene and liquid oxygen, you'll see the rocket throwing the exhaust out of the engine bells in one direction while pushing the rocket in the other. This is a great example of Newton's third law of motion. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. That 1 million pound weight of propellant is turned into all the flames that you see in flight coming out of the engines, creating the almost 2 million pounds of force exerted on the rocket to lift it up.
Now, in order to get to space, the rocket has to do more than just go up. It also has to go sideways really, really fast. At liftoff, gravity is pulling straight down on the rocket. But as we ascend, we'll start to tilt the engines, which is technically referred to as gimbaling. That turns the rocket horizontally. We're still going up, but we're also now heading horizontally away from the launch pad, and that maneuver is referred to as a gravity turn. The rocket typically needs to get to about 7.5 kilometers per second, or about 17,500 miles an hour horizontally, in order to avoid being pulled back down to Earth and to get into orbit. To help demonstrate the concept, imagine we were firing a cannon from a really high mountain. The cannonball will arc, and then gravity will pull it back down to Earth. As you increase the power, the cannonball will arc and land further and further away. Eventually, you could continue to increase the power, and the cannonball will go so fast that it ends up in free fall around the Earth. Gravity's still pulling on it, but it's going so fast that it never hits the ground. This arc that constantly misses the Earth is what we call an orbit. So when we get to liftoff today, keep an eye out on the orientation of Falcon 9. You'll see it initially start to go straight up until about T+10 seconds, at which point we'll start to shift orientation so Falcon 9 can start picking up sideways velocity. But before we get to that, why don't we check in on the status of the vehicle for today's launch?
We are currently just under T-minus 5 minutes and 30 seconds from liftoff, and Falcon 9 is now moving into the final stages of the countdown. We are currently waiting for the transporter erector, or TE, to retract, and that's that truss structure right next to the vehicle. First, the TE clamps will open, and the transporter erector will then begin to retract away from the rocket slightly, and at T0, hydraulics will pull the TE farther away from Falcon 9 as it lifts off. Now, the TE provides liquids, gases, electrical connections to the second stage, as well as air conditioning to the payload fairing.
Thanks, pressing for Strongback retract.
Now, those clamp arms that you can see just below the fairing should start to open soon, and strong back retraction should happen in just a few seconds here.
Strong back lever started.
You heard strong back has started to retract. You can see those clamp arms opening around the Falcon's second stage there. You can see that Strombeck TE is started to move away from the vehicle there. Now, the first and second stages are both nearly fully loaded with 1 million pounds of kerosene fuel and liquid oxygen. Super chilled liquid oxygen is our propellant oxidizer, and that is what you see creating those white clouds that you can see around Falcon 9 there. And that's because the warm, humid ambient air causes the liquid oxygen to turn into a gas around the booster. Now, first stage should finish prop loading at T-minus 3 minutes, just under 10 seconds here. And the second stage will finish prop loading about a minute after that at T-minus 2 minutes.
Poco bleed.
At T-minus 60 seconds, Falcon
Stage
9...
1 locks load, close out.
Falcon 9 will be in startup, and you heard that call out for stage 1 locks load complete. And when Falcon 9 gets in startup at T-minus 60 seconds, this means that the rocket's autonomous internal flight computers have taken control of the launch countdown. And just inside of T-minus 2 seconds, we light the Merlin 1D engines using that T-type ignition source we talked about, and we're set to lift off. The Starlink payload continues to be healthy, and the Falcon 9 team is tracking no issues on the rocket. Weather is still looking favorable, and the range is green for launch. So here at just over T-minus 2 minutes, let's listen in on the terminal countdown.
Stage 2 locks load, close out.
We have just finished loading our second stage. Our Falcon 9 is now fully loaded with over 1 million pounds of kerosene, RP1, and liquid oxygen. Again, that white cloud coming from the booster there towards the middle is normal and expected. That is venting from the TE LOX line. Again, at T-minus 1 minute, Falcon 9 will go into startup, and this is when stage 1 and stage 2 will begin pressurizing for launch, and the flight computer will have taken control of the countdown.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Falcon 9 is in startup, and in just a few seconds, the launch director should give the final go for launch.
Stage 2, pressing for flight.
Falcon 9, Starlink LDs go for launch.
You heard that call out for go for launch. All systems are go.
T-minus 30 seconds.
Let's listen in to the terminal count and watch as Falcon 9 takes our Starlink satellites to orbit.
T-minus 15 seconds.
Stage 1, pressing for flight.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition and liftoff.
Vehicle is pitching downrange.
Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
What a beautiful day for a rocket launch here. As you can see, Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from Pad 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, carrying our stack of 60 Starlink satellites to orbit. Moments ago, we throttled the engines down in preparation for max Q, or the maximum aerodynamic pressure that the rocket will see.
Vehicle is supersonic.
Vehicle is supersonic, and we should be passing through max Q here in just a few seconds.
Vehicle has reached maximum aerodynamic pressure.
We just passed through max Q, and in about a minute, we will have 3 events happening back to back, and that's main engine cutoff, or MECO, stage separation, and second engine start 1. So first, main engine cutoff. That is where all 9 Merlin 1D engines that you can see burning right now will shut off to slow the vehicle down in preparation for stage separation. And this is where the first stage separates from the second
Game
stage.
control has begun.
With the first stage making its way back to land on our drone ship, just read the instructions, while second stage continues on its journey to its third event, which is second engine startup 1. Now this is where the 1 MVAC engine on our second stage lights up and propels that second stage along with our Starlink satellites to orbit. What a beautiful view of those 9 M1D engines burning there on beautiful clear day. And we're coming up on main engine cutoff shortly here in just about 10 seconds.
MECO.
Stage separation confirmed.
And recognition.
You can see in that beautiful footage that we did just have MECO, stage separation, and second engine startup 1. Those grid fins are coming out on the first stage there on the left. And in just a few seconds, we should have our fairing deploy.
Fairing separation confirmed.
You heard the call out, and you can see on your video there that we have had successful fairing deploy. And again, today's flight marks the 40th time that SpaceX has reflown a Falcon fairing half since November of 2019. Now, this is also our first 5th reflight for one of our fairing halves and a 3rd for the other half. In order to recover these fairing halves for future flights, we will be attempting to recover them again with the help of our recovery vessels, Go Searcher and Go Navigator.
Stage 2 continuing towards its first orbit on the right-hand side of your screen. Left-hand side of your screen, you can see Falcon 9's first stage reorienting itself for its next 2 activities. That'll be 2 burns to come back safely to Earth. First of those being the entry burn. That's where we'll ignite 3 of the Merlin 1D engines to help slow down the first stage as it re-enters the upper parts of the Earth's atmosphere. The second burn will happen closer to the drone ship. That's the landing burn. That's where we'll ignite just the single center Merlin engine. That'll bring the first stage's velocity rapidly down to 0 for a soft touchdown. On the right-hand side of your screen, second stage continuing to burn nominally, acceleration right down the middle. And you can see the glow of the nozzle there. Now, if you are just catching up with us, we did have a
Stage 2 on nominal trajectory.
We did have a successful launch of Falcon 9 from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. And first stage on the left-hand side of your screen is headed back to our drone ship named Just Read the Instructions, stationed out in the Atlantic Ocean. Second stage heading on the right-hand side of your screen is headed to its first orbit. As a reminder, today's mission does mark the 2nd flight for this booster. If you happen to catch fairing separation earlier, this will be the first 5th flight for one of those fairing halves and the 3rd flight for the other half. Reusability is critical to what we do here at SpaceX. It allows us to refly the most expensive parts of the rocket, and that drives down the cost. Now you can see the grid fins extended on the left-hand side of your screen. Every so often, you'll see puffs of white gas. That's attitude control coming from the first stage to help reorient us to get the 9 Merlins on Falcon 9 pointed towards the Earth. Those Merlin engines are optimized for thrust at sea level. They help Falcon 9 achieve about 190,000 pounds of thrust during ascent and descent. Meanwhile, the Merlin vacuum is optimized for space. That's why it has that larger nozzle. Now, coming up here is entry burn. Keep an eye out on the left-hand side of your screen.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
Stage 1 FTS is safe.
This burn expected to last about 20 seconds.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
And successful shutdown of those 3 Merlin engines. Now, if you followed along our missions in the past, you'll know that soot
Stage
on
2
the first
continues on
stage
nominal trajectory.
is an indication that the rocket has flown before. That's because we use rocket-grade kerosene, or RP1, as our fuel in Falcon 9. That's a carbon-based propellant. As we burn it, it generates soot. So with the engines down, as we're coming in through the Earth's atmosphere, the soot from the plume comes back up on the first stage and deposits it along the surface of the vehicle. Now, if we didn't do that entry burn, the first stage would come in very quickly in the atmosphere, and the aerodynamic forces could
Stage
cause
1
it to
is
rip apart.
transonic.
So that's why we do that entry burn. And we did temporarily lose the video feed, but we'll hopefully, there we go. Beautiful view. Now, at this point, since we're in the Earth's atmosphere, those grid fins will take over orientation and trajectory back towards the drone ship. Now, coming up, stage 1 landing burn will begin. Shortly after landing burn ends,
Landing burn startup.
the second stage's engine will shut down. We should be in our expected orbit there. So keep an eye out, see if we can get a video feedback for the first stage.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy.
Fantastic, right down the middle. That's our 85th successful recovery, 100th, 18th successful launch of the Falcon 9. Now keep an ear out here for second engine cutoff number 1 on the second stage. And with that, navigation officer, we did hear the call out there for SECO. Navigation officer will be checking
Expected loss of signal.
the
Cape.
parameters. Make sure we are in our intended orbit.
Nominal orbit insertion.
Fantastic news. So from here, we do have a coast phase followed up by the second burn of our second stage engine. These additional burns allow us to modify the orbits of the payload more efficiently than if we were to launch directly into our final orbit. That's just one of those quirks of orbital mechanics. And today, our second stage will coast for 35 minutes until we reach apogee, which is the highest point of the orbit. Views here on your screen of the fairing and then the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage. So once we reach the highest point of the orbit, we will reignite the second stage for a short burn. And you can follow along the progress of the second stage with this animation showing where we are around the Earth. We'll be back here at T plus 44 minutes and 30 seconds for second engine start number 2. See you soon.
Acquisition of signal, Newfoundland. Expected loss of signal, Bermuda. Expected loss of signal, Newfoundland. Acquisition of signal, Goonhilly.